Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon area. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. My guest, Rick East. I was going to say Rick North.
You were going to say West, weren't you?
Good to see you again.
You too.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about the importance of the First and Second Amendments. The importance of the First and Second Amendments to our Constitution. And the amendments are quite an interesting thing that have come about as a result of our Constitution and making it work more meaningfully for the ordinary citizenry. And first we're going to do a little bio about who Rick is, and then we'll go into the second half of the show, so to speak, about the First and Second Amendments and how important they are to making our democracy work and America be as wonderful as it is through all these years. So let's talk about who you are now. We've done this before, so we'll do an abbreviated version of who you are. You want to wing it from the very beginning until I ask you some questions later on to see if we covered all the stuff that illustrates who you are so the viewers can know where you're coming from?
That'd be pretty good, I think so.
Take off.
Take off.
Yeah.
Well, hi, I'm Rick East.
Uh-huh.
I'm born in Sacramento, California. My education is, I studied economics at Berkeley and then went into the electronics industry for my career.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, I also got a master's degree, MBA. Worked 38 years in the electronics industry, moved from California to Oregon in 1994 when I was hired by Intel. And I worked in these very buildings in the Supercomputer Systems Division when it was Intel lease buildings. So I have two daughters, my wife, and we live. My daughters don't have. I don't have any grandkids yet, but maybe someday.
So, and you talked about when and where you were born. You don't answer me when I ask you why were you born. I think you've thought about that a couple of times, but you haven't come up with anything. I have a reason why I was born.
And you know it, and you know what that is.
Oh yeah.
I'm still wondering and searching.
You're going to ask me why I was born?
I'm going to ask you why you were born. Yes.
Do it.
Why were you born?
To be nice.
To be nice.
It's as simple as that.
That's just like that.
That's what Mama said when I was a little boy. She says, "Don, be nice."
Did you care? Did you do that?
I'm still working on it.
Still working on it. Well, at least you know what it is. I'm still trying to figure it out.
How's that sound? Is it? Were you born to be nice?
I don't think that was the sole reason, but I think that's got to be part of it. Yeah.
Okay. If you don't have an answer I'll answer for you. Okay. I got a load of them. I've had 19 years of this stuff.
Someday I will come with the real answer, but you know it's the search, not the answer.
Will you tell me before you come back on the show again what's your reason for being here?
When I figure that out, I will tell you. Yes.
I'm not going to live that long. You're working on it.
Well, I won't take that long to find out.
Okay. There you go.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And you were born in California.
Yeah.
The West Coast.
Yes. Been the West Coast all my life.
And I've asked you before if you're a liberal, and you're denying that you are. You were born in California. You have to be a liberal.
No, you don't.
Okay.
My family were Republicans.
You're an aberration. It's called the left coast, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know it is.
In our beautiful country. We talked about your religion in the past. The views that you had a religion, but you're now a meditator for the most part. And you've experimented with different religions, trying them on for size and finally you are seem pretty contented and peaceful with where you are in terms of religion.
Yeah. I think the spirituality is probably the most important. I think you draw from all the. I draw from several religions, and as we mentioned, I always like that quote from Martin Luther King about God reveals Himself to all the great religions of the world, but no one has a monopoly on the truth. And I think we learned something from everything. I don't think there's necessarily one way. So within meditation and exploring spirituality, and with that method, I think it's opened me up to broader thought. I've always felt that science and quote the spiritual world work together anyway.
What's a spiritual experience? Do you have any of those come to mind?
Well, for me, it would be a sense of peace, awareness, focus, being present right here and now. This is all that matters. This is the only thing that's real, and so that is the sense of spirituality that I get. It's not just this physical world that we live in.
Yeah.
We know it as a higher self, an energy about you that is beyond what we are here right now today.
I like to look at spirituality in terms of feelings, for want of a better way of considering spirituality. I have a spiritual experience when I see typically a mom or a dad with a little tiny tot in the supermarket checkout line, and without mom or dad knowing it, a little baby and I make eye contact. And there's something that goes on between that baby and I right now, and it's timeless. And as I go through the checkout line, the baby's following me and doesn't know what's going on with mom or dad, paying bills and like that. And that's priceless.
Yeah.
And there's a meadow in Yosemite National Park, one of the big meadows that's so beautiful. And at first sunrise in the morning, to be there sitting on a big rock and watching the sun come up. And then I know I've had a spiritual experience because I have no idea how much time has passed from the time I first sat on that rock
Absolutely.
in the sun. It's timeless. That's the key.
You get timeless. Excuse me.
And there's all sorts of ways of considering spirituality, and I end up feeling appreciative and good and kind and connected, so to speak. And I'm not sure what that means either, so don't ask me.
Yeah, and what you're describing is similar. People talk about energy, movement of energy or feeling. I don't necessarily have a sense of things like that, but there's a peace or a being or a connectedness, like you said, when you're watching the sunrise. Yeah, I understand.
Isn't there a sense of timelessness when you're in that mode or that way of being at the moment, where you stop? For me, I stopped thinking, so to speak, and suddenly, where I was aware I was thinking, I've suddenly stopped being how I was, and says, where was I? Time has passed by. I don't know how much time has passed by. So whatever happens in that time period, we're talking about things I don't know about. But you got some kind of comments you'll be taking in the second half of the show about what this is about. So we'll continue on with that later on.
Sure thing. You know, what you just described happens every day when you drive. You're driving along and you kind of, it's a state of hypnosis, basically. And how did I get here? You drove the car, you had no idea. The time passes. These things happen every day, all the time.
Timelessness.
Timelessness.
All right. And you don't claim a political persuasion. And we did a show earlier, which the viewers may see. And I was trying to pin you with the label of being a lefty, and you've been trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
And I've been teasing you through the whole interview.
Yeah.
That's another example of your left leanings that you're denying. but I still think you're a lefty. Do you think so?
No, I don't.
All right.
I think I'm in. I think I fit in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, but probably more left than I would have been several years ago. You're not going to get me hooked on that. No way.
What do you think of the Greenpeace movement and Greenpeace ship? And
I think that good intentions. I think all these organizations have good intention. I don't think it always takes in necessarily with maybe tactics or strategy. I don't necessarily always agree with, but I think they're trying to do good things.
how about Jacques Cousteau?
Jacques Cousteau, he's not alive anymore.
Dead or alive? All right. Oh, we talked about in the past people that you look up to or admired, and you mentioned one or two names before. Any new names you want to add to that?
New names? No, I always, anytime I get asked that, I go right back to Lincoln. That's my number one.
Mm-hmm.
Always, I think always will be. And very important to the country, very important to the time that he passed through and how he impacted the country. I think it was too bad that he was taken out of the game too early.
Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned a time back that you embraced Judaism, and yet I'm tempted to ask you, what did you think of Jesus Christ as a human being?
So in making a conversion from Christianity to Judaism, that's a big struggle. You don't just wake up one day and decide I'm going to convert.
Yeah.
You have to struggle with that because that's the big divide in belief. And I think as a kid being raised, you don't necessarily. It's not necessarily your belief. It may be that you are you're impressionable and this is the way you're raised, so that must be true. When I was involved with Jewish people and the way they would view the world and they view Jesus, it's completely different than a Christian does. So that was a big struggle because one of the things in conversion is you have to renounce. It's kind of like when you change citizenship.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. I can't renounce, or what to me that would be renouncing my family, and there's no way I would do that. So I had to work for years to come to I don't want to call it an agreement, but a way to move and actually be accepted without renouncing, just flat out renouncing the Christian faith or Jesus in that manner. What I do believe is I believe again, no religion has a monopoly on the truth. I was very comfortable with tenets of Judaism. As a growing up Christian, that one piece was a struggle. The Trinity versus one God. I mean, you can see both arguments. The religious beliefs are based on, but the tenets of Judaism were not bad or wrong, and I think it fit with my philosophy more or allowed for me to question.
That's why I like agnosticism, because it doesn't limit me to one approach to godliness and spirituality and what's really important as a human animal.
Yeah.
And I don't like to say, I used to say, someone says, well, you're an atheist. I says, no, I might accept being an atheist, but not an atheist. That's a pejorative, right?
Yeah.
So I want to include everybody. And like life after death, for example, I say, well, I don't know. And we'll wait and see. And I'll let you know when I find out.
however you can do that. But you're only aware of this life right now. You don't know. Yeah. So religions, and for me, is an interesting thing. I was never really compelled with the formal, the rituals that are done in church or synagogue. I like I said, I moved kind of into the practice that I prefer, and the exploration is with meditation group and learning about the universe, the world, and the purpose by exploring in that manner.
I like that. Yeah.
The people are way more accepting. I mean, you run into people who are very critical in all the religions. There's a lot of politics in how the businesses run. There's politics in how the people relate to you. Poor Caroline, she married outside the faith, and it was rough for her. The Jews were rough for her. They sometimes accepted me more than her because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a lot of things that just didn't fit for us in where we are now. It's real. So I don't have any regrets. But if I identify Jewish, but practice is through I think a wider look at the universe. I can't believe we are here without something greater. I don't think things just happened. Physics and the Big Bang and all that. Well, what even can cause that to happen? There must be something bigger than us. It just doesn't happen. There should be nothing.
It's still happening.
And it's still it never stops. Yeah, everything's changing constantly.
What do you think of global warming?
Well, I think you can take the stats and see that there are changes occurring. I don't know. I'm not as sensitive to only human activity, but I'm sure that human activity has created or contributed to it quite a bit. And that like anything, when you start looking at something ahead of its time, or when things are happening, you're a heretic, and then you look back a couple hundred years ago and, God, we didn't read the signs very well, did we? Yeah. So I think it's ridiculous on both sides to just one or the other. I think everything always constantly works together.
I think you're an agnostic.
You do? I don't want to
I
get
keep baiting you.
I'm not going to get away.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
I'm unaffiliated.
Yeah. So we have, my God, a good 40 minutes left to talk about the First and Second Amendments and anything related to that. So shall we start? I have a piece here from Wikipedia that talked about the amendments, which I'm sure people are all aware of. I'll just read a little bit about it. 33 amendments to the U.S. Constitution have been proposed by the United States Congress and sent to the states for ratification since the Constitution was put into operation on March 4, 1789. 27 of these, having been ratified by the requisite number of states, are part of the Constitution. 27. The first 10 amendments were adopted and ratified simultaneously and are known collectively as the Bill of Rights. 6 amendments adopted by Congress and sent to the states have not been ratified by the required number of states. 4 of these amendments are still technically open and pending. One is closed and has failed by its own terms, and one is closed and has failed by the terms of the resolution proposing it. They can't make up their minds, can we? Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution detailed the 2-step process for amending the nation's frame of government. The governments must be properly proposed and ratified before becoming operative. Amendments. This process was designed to strike a balance between the excesses of constant change and inflexibility. So enough of that for now, but you're primarily concerned this evening about the First and Second Amendments. Why do you consider those as important as you do?
I think what led me to propose this is we talk about rights. The Bill of Rights was put into the Constitution basically to protect some individual rights. There were some that opposed the bill, having the need for a Bill of Rights, because they said the Constitution had already mentioned that and covered that, and the federal government was given certain powers, and those that the federal government didn't have were relegated to the states. But there were those that were worried about, in the day, in the 1700s especially, the tyranny and individuals' rights. And so the Bill of Rights was a controversial bit of legislation. All of them didn't pass. 10 of them did. I think it was 13 or more actually were proposed. But the first two, rights are great. That's fine. But with every right comes a responsibility. And what my concern right now in living day to day is that everybody, pushes rights and what their rights are in front of you, but they aren't necessarily all that necessarily concerned about the responsibility to be able to have that right.
Well, some people would say that to say that you have rights implies that there's a responsibility without having to state it.
And that's the same argument of even putting the Bill of Rights in the Constitution in the first place, that we don't need to state it. It's implied in the Constitution. So we're still debating the right in many cases, and sometimes in just our day-to-day lives, it's we have the right and people flaunt it and don't have the responsibility that's necessary to even have the right. So I'm proposing this, kind of for sake of argument, a Bill of Responsibilities as a companion to the Bill of Rights and maybe the first two. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to go out and campaign for adding a Bill of Responsibility to the Constitution, but the point of it is that we need as much emphasis on the responsibilities that are implied in these rights as we do as the rights themselves. So in the First Amendment talks about a number of things. The First Amendment, I'll just read it off.
Please, of course.
Congress shall make no law respecting establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. There's a lot there, and it all sounds really good, but it can get interpreted and get twisted, and the way it's acted upon can be less than responsible, not what's intended. I think Benjamin Franklin talked about the fact that when people have rights and act responsibly as if they need no government to oversee them. And that would be I guess, an ideal world in some respects, at least maybe mentally. But we need, I think we need, any game you play, take sports, you need checks and balances, you need a referee, you need rules. Otherwise, it doesn't work very well. And there needs to be checks and balances on the rules as well. So we are constantly in this, even though we have rights, we're constantly in the need of a referee or checks and balances to keep us doing what's intended and being able to be responsible citizens to allow the great freedoms that we have in this country.
So I'm wondering, how would you word the first article of responsibility in response to the First Amendment as exists today?
For the First Amendment, let's step aside for a minute.
Of course.
And to try and answer that question, people talk about we live in a democracy. The news, the politicians say right now the big thing, Russia is attacking our democracy. Well, we're actually a republic, And they say, well, that's just words. And it's, well, there is a difference. And in a democracy is where the majority rules. So 51% to 49, 51%, the majority being a majority as a group.
Do we have a democracy in America today?
We have a republic.
Huh.
We have a republic. A democracy, because the main difference being that the republic respects the rights of the minority and the individual. Whereas in a true democracy, straight democracy, the majority rules and they don't have to pay attention or worry about the minority. The minority could be anything, like Republican or Democrat or racial or religion. And there are certain, as even stated all the way back in the Declaration of Independence, inalienable rights.
Mm-hmm.
And the republic is designed to respect those. So you may lose the election, but it doesn't mean that they can completely ignore and remove your rights. So if you go back to the First Amendment, how would I write that? The right is the government's not going to establish an official religion, but sometimes people act as if it is, because a majority of people are Christian, or a majority of people in another country, to take an example, maybe in Muslim countries, they don't have to respect the rights of any of the minority religion or the positions. The U.S. is not like that. So in spite of all of the dialogue that goes along today about the attack on Christianity and such, actually it's in my case and in my study and in my view, coming from a Christian background, it was normal to see Christmas carols in school, public school, and you did not think about that there might be a Jewish kid in class or a Muslim kid in class, and in a true republic, they would respect the fact that these differences existed. Should it be in the public school? Yes or no? I'm not going to say that, but to exclude the rights and the positions of the minority in executing in a true republic, that would not occur. And that's what's this evolution and this discussion in society today is happening. But it feels like an attack on the majority position.
It seems like the issue is skipped when we're talking about the republic versus a democracy. I think even in a republic, democracy is a necessary requirement to have people be free and live according to what we intended in our Constitution. So the republic doesn't make a big difference, a serious difference, when you consider whether you call it a republic or something else. When you have gerrymandering, for example, the implication is that you must have a democracy, whatever form or name you label your government, whether it's...
Well, gerrymandering is a way to manipulate, the vote, actually. But in spite of that, even though it might, as a group, a particular position or party gets into power, they can't with the Bill of Rights, they cannot deny the individual rights officially of the minority. Now, in execution, human beings, people, that how it's carried out, gerrymandering is a way to manipulate that, and then people are always and that's where checks and balances have to really set in, because the last thing you want is a dictatorship. And you can find some writings on democracy is if you look at a pure democracy, it basically becomes a dictatorship, even though you vote by the majority over the opposing group. So I don't want to get too wrapped around the axle on that, but I think people they don't understand that there's a difference, and the importance of respecting the minority inalienable rights as one of the big reasons that they pushed for having a Bill of Rights in the Constitution in the first place. Now, I'm not a constitutional lawyer or scholar. I'm not claiming that. This is my opinion, and I'm looking at that as a basis for my positions on responsibilities. And I think the what's going on now, freedom of speech, that's the classic. They say you can't yell fire in
That's a big one.
Yeah, responsibility, and there's things of that nature we need to have people pay attention to. That's been thrown out quite often.
Wasn't the responsibility implied in freedom of speech?
It's implied, yes, but sometimes
you
it
can't
needs
spell out everything, every
things
detail.
to knock it on the head. Well, you don't every single instance. That one helps you. That one helps you. A reasonable thinking person. Would you do this?
Reasonable responsibility. Those all fall under the same.
Yeah, but people need to grasp that more. Not just the right, but the responsibility. Freedom of the press. Right now, there are presidents running around saying that the press is the enemy of the people. That's
just wait tomorrow here. Probably change that.
Yeah, it'll change that. But a point. It's part of the check and balance. There have always been partisan newspapers going all the way back to the 1700s.
Are we having checks and balances nowadays in today's government in Washington?
There will hopefully be a check and balance in a couple of years at the ballot box. But right now, this is something we have never seen before. I can't dive too deep in that. We'll go on to a completely different topic. But again, take another right, to peaceably assemble. Okay, so take the Charlottesville last year.
Mm-hmm.
There's every reason that people can believe what they want to believe, but if they go and they assemble and they demonstrate, what is their true intention? Is it really
true intention?
True
That's
intention.
the key.
Exactly. So the true intention is they hide behind the freedom of expression or to peaceably assemble, but yet they come out prepared for battle. Now you can say, well, yeah, there's another group of people that met them, but the group of people that met them, they don't have a tenet of hate, and there would be no hate if the other group went away, whereas vice versa, when the neo-Nazis come out, their tenet is exactly and very clear. They might want to walk down the street peaceably, maybe they should be able to, but their intent is to mix it up. They're not innocent, and that's not a peaceable assembly. That's not a responsible way to act. Petition the government for redress of grievances. I think that one we're seeing an awful lot of today. We're seeing an awful lot of that today. But the First Amendment, again, all of these, the press, they are responsible to be part of that check and balance.
But then who owns the press?
Well,
there's a fundamental issue involved here.
And there you go to responsibility and
the super rich own the mainstream media, such that the ordinary citizen thinks they're having an objective assessment of what's important and how to view it. And it's really twisted and biased because you and our ordinary citizens are not aware of all the important things to consider when we're considering a particular issue like freedom of speech or freedom of the press.
Absolutely.
So I don't think, as you can tell, my unhappiness about the media and the big difference between the super rich, the obsessively wealthy, and ordinary citizens. I'm a democratic socialist too. Could you tell that?
Gosh, geez.
I all these labels are like
Like one of those little bing, okay, and the light goes on. Yeah.
Before George Stalin came along, I think I was a pure communist, but that's been warped and tarnished very much until nobody talks about being a communist anymore. There was a time when there were communists in this country who were considered legitimate Americans too.
Yeah, it was a ways
But
back.
I'm digressing, yeah.
Yeah, it was a ways back. Yeah. And again, that's a philosophy. I mean, you think about if what sorts of control, but there's corruption. People run everything, so they corrupt the system, and that's why check and balance and a more. I'm not saying that the press today is way different than it was 60 years ago.
The days of Walter Cronkite and those kinds of people. Oh.
Yeah. And but my point is you go all the way back to the beginning of the Republic, and the newspapers were all partisan, and it was just as brutal and lies and stuff back then. It's not new today, but it's different. It's definitely different, and a lot of
because of the wealth of the people who can own more newspapers.
Well, and what the other thing that's really obviously changed things is the social media. I mean, you don't have professional. You have many fewer professional journalists, or there are not so many jobs out there where people are really doing a solid investigative job that there used to be. And social media puts out opinion pieces. You know, it's you and me. We go out there, and even right now, people can challenge what we're saying. We're not the end all, the be all, but people get news from social media. I don't even talk about fake news. Yeah, you don't know. You have to sort through so much. So it's just changed considerably in only in the last 20 years. It's amazing, and the cable news and all that. It's all about getting eyeballs, and they cram a lot in, and they make it sensational, and they only look at a few things.
You got to really work hard to find alternative sources of fact of what's really going on.
On what's really going on. Yeah.
So there's not much time for meditation if you're busy protecting yourself from tyrants.
Protecting from tyrants. So let's go on to the Second Amendment.
Okay, you betcha.
So
the
Second Amendment. This is talk about a lightning rod, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state.
Well, what does that mean? A well-regulated militia. I interrupted you. Please go on.
Mm-hmm. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So the scholars try and figure out from the English of the day, what was the intent on this? The challenge about a well-regulated militia. A lot of people stop right there, and being necessary to the security of a free state. A lot of other people say that's the end of one point, and there's the next point, the right of the people.
Depending on your political bent as to how you'll interpret what's meant by those words.
Exactly. And it shall not be infringed. So there are people that take that, you can't do anything to infringe my right to
and they're walking around with arms, sidearms, and shotguns and all kinds of weapons. And it's even okay now for those kinds of people to embrace automatic weapons.
So that's where there's the debate, and I don't want to get into that part of the debate. Is how far can the last sentence shall not be infringed? What can society do to protect itself? And that's where responsibility comes in. So for me, I wouldn't say I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, but I support the second. I like shooting sport. Look at my hat. I shoot trap.
Mm-hmm.
I own handguns. I have a concealed carry license. I don't carry all the time, but I own firearms.
Be careful. The CIA is monitoring this program.
I know. They already have a file on me. I'm not worried about them. But the point is that you do. I enjoy shooting sports, but I do it very responsibly. And in a lot of people, it's just about I have the right to have the guns, and that's it. They don't know how to use them. They don't know how to.
What about those people who are irresponsible and abuse this right to have guns
And that's a big problem. It's a big problem for all of us who would,
that's been ongoing for years.
Absolutely.
And years.
But it's pretty. There's some basics that folks can do. I find contradictions a lot in people I talk to. An interesting one is you can get in a debate with someone that's just super Second Amendment, and there is nothing that can get. You should be able to buy anything, anytime, as quickly as you want. Anybody. Now, the argument is you can't take away my right to protect myself. Well, and so you can't have a 3-day waiting period or a 5-day waiting period. You can't force registration. You can't force me to take a class and become qualified at using the gun. The last person in the world I want to see going to buy a gun today, and in Oregon you walk in, you pass the check, you can walk out with your gun. I've bought several. You don't want that guy going out trying to defend himself, because it's not that easy to shoot at what you want when you're stressed, and if you're really that worried about protecting yourself, why didn't you go and buy that gun and practice and learn, in the first place, everything about it and how to shoot? People will say, well, you just can't take my right away. Now I know one. I go and I shoot at one place and don't get in an argument with the folks, because there's nothing can be taken away. Yet they won't let somebody go into their range that doesn't know how to shoot, and a friend, show them what to do. Well, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. You'll let somebody walk in and buy a gun to go out and protect themselves, but here somebody's trying to learn, and even though I understand it's all for liability, you should be taking the courses from a qualified instructor if you're going to learn to do something like this. But I just always found that argument ironic. You don't care about some guy walking in, doesn't know what he's doing, walking right out, and supposedly going to defend himself. It's not that easy. When you get in a situation like that, it's stressful. The classes that you go through to get your concealed carry license, the people that teach you go through the physiological changes, the things that happen if you're in a stressful situation like that. Some police officers haven't even experienced it, let alone my instructor. I asked him, he told us what happened to your body, the physiology, and I asked him, well, have you experienced that? And he said, no, and I hope I never do. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't know from experience. A lot of police officers haven't been in a battle. The military, probably the higher percentage would be military that have been deployed into a combat zone, experience what goes on with your body when you're in that kind of situation. So you want somebody walking in a store and picking up a gun that day to go out to defend himself? I mean, the safety rules are very common sense, and they're pretty simple. And there's many of them. I keep handy always 11, and for instance, you treat every gun as if it was loaded. When my daughters have gone, and my wife, and when I taught them to handle, I said I might clear the gun and show them in front of them and then hand it to them. I want them to redo that automatically. It doesn't matter that I showed them it was empty. I want them to redo
More
it.
people are killed by empty guns.
Absolutely. Cleaning a gun. How many times on TV do you hear that? Oh, he was shot while cleaning his gun. He violated a couple of rules here.
Simple rules.
Yeah, simple rules. Storing guns securely. How many little babies and kids are getting at their gun? Well, I got to keep it close by for protection. You're keeping it loaded, chambered, and
should
loaded?
there be any controls on people owning guns?
So where do you put the limit with the responsibility? People aren't responsible right now.
I asked you first.
Where
do you put the limits?
Yeah, where do you put the limits? I'm debating that myself, because I don't want it taken away, because I shoot for sport, and different ways. My shotgun for my trap, and I like to target shoot. I do not hunt. I never. I only hunted a few times as a kid, but I don't hunt on a regular basis.
Why don't you hunt?
I went out when I was a kid, and we went pheasant hunting, and
I'm smiling because a memory of mine comes back to me.
yeah, I didn't get any, but I remember seeing them and shooting, and then I remember one time when we were out in the fields and big oak tree, and my buddy just fired his shotgun up in the tree, and there were a bunch of blackbirds in the tree, and a bunch of them fell out. I go, this hunting wasn't for me. I didn't need to do it, but I don't despair hunters, and some hunters are not all hunters, but hunters are part of the conservation effort.
Let me interrupt you with a personal story of
Sure.
mine. We used to go rabbit hunting in the desert of Southern California, and there were 4 or 5 of us were good buddies, and we were youngsters, teenagers, and I could never shoot a rabbit. And we'd come back, and guys had 3 and 4 rabbits with a limit, and
Yeah.
every time and even I got a good gun, and I used to have nice guns, and there's a rabbit, and he'd pose just a short distance away and sit still for me, and I'd aim at him, and I could never hit a rabbit. And
Just look you in the eye.
in the Army, I was a medic. That was a condition that I volunteered. I would never carry a gun. That's always been my philosophy it still is. But I had to take the infantry basic training. It was a requirement before you could become a medic.
Yep.
And I more than qualified because I could aim and shoot pretty good. So I was just beyond a marksman and a level of ability. But when I come out of the Army and we were hunting rabbits in the desert, I could not, I don't know why I would miss. So the record shows I could shoot. But for some reason or other, so deep down inside of me, I didn't want to kill no damn animal.
Yeah, yes.
Pardon me.
It's different when that's an animal or especially a person. I couldn't imagine doing that. The only way, and you don't know how you would react, is if you're in that situation. But I would hope if I was in a situation like that I would protect myself and my family and be able to carry it out.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, but you don't know. You don't know.
But how do you account for the kinds of human beings who are so sick or deranged or flawed that they very, very easily, pretty much easily, kill or injure another human being?
Yeah, and that gets into the whole mental health aspects of things. How do these people slip through the cracks? Well, in some cases there are a lot of signs and they're not read, and in other cases there are no signs. So how do you do this? And I'll get myself in big trouble, because I just don't think that if something is so important, we can put some more controls on it, and people can be responsible, and you don't lose any right.
Should ordinary citizens have the right to own automatic weapons?
Well, they don't now.
Can't you buy certain, with a slight modification once you own it, and then have it behave the same as a machine gun?
Well, that's what that guy did in Las Vegas.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, in fact, I had never even heard of a buttstock before Las Vegas. I didn't even know about it.
To see it demonstrated on television is just mind-boggling.
But those are things. There are quote, when people say common sense steps, what are they? The first ones start with the safety rules, storing them safely and locking them up. Mm-hmm. But think about it. The philosophy of people. Now, I admitted to you that I have a concealed carry license, mm-hmm. but anytime I carry, I don't chamber, and I have safety on, and mm-hmm. I'm very well concealed. Other people are chambered, and their safety's off, and they're ready to go. And in their argument, they'll look at me and say, "You're crazy, because if you get in that situation, that split second could be the difference. Well, yeah, it could, but it's most likely I'm not going to get in that situation. And oh, by the way, if I'm in that, my procedure will be what it needs to be. I'm already in trouble if I have to fire that fast. Now, there's arguments on both sides, but I have friends that are adamant. Once you get a concealed carry license, you wear it as a way of life. Now, I'm not going to wear. I'm not afraid when I go out. I'm not. That's not when I go out. I'm not every day looking around. I worry about the guy that goes and gets his license, and is just itching for a fight. A couple of years ago, there was a guy over in the over at the mall, at Lloyd Center, and shooter came out in the mall and started firing, and he challenged him, and he had him lined up, but he didn't fire because he was concerned. One of the rules is know what your target is and what's behind the target. He could have missed, and if he missed, he might hit somebody else. Luckily, just the challenge was enough to stop that guy. But most people just would probably just cut loose. I don't want that guy carrying a weapon. I don't know how I would react either. But
how do you protect yourself, or how do you prevent him from owning a weapon? How do you make that kind of assessment and say whether this guy?
I know you can't. The only thing you can do is go through, just like learning anything. You go through, you get educated, you get trained, and you practice. Driving, we practice every day. We're licensed to death. They check up on us all the time. I don't have any problem with being, some of these common sense ideas, but I have friends that think I'm an absolute nutcase. Because they're going to come and get you. Yeah. The ones that really bother me though now, too, other than there's the kids and the accidents that happen, but the professionals. This is one thing that's really bugging me. The professionals. When we first moved to Oregon, there was a training session over on the coast. I think it was one of the police forces or tactical. And the story is that while they were out there, one of the officers was killed, and they're supposed to be using blanks. Well, first thing, he didn't know his gun was loaded. He violated that law. Second thing, he aimed the gun at something he did not want to destroy, because he shouldn't even have been. I was in reenacting. We never aimed the gun at somebody. You just kind of and we were shooting blanks. But you never aimed at anybody. So he is a professional, and he's already violated 2 laws, and then he fires, and he killed the guy. This is a professional. Police officers, when the guys are running away. Now, a regular citizen, if you came at me now and you're aggressive, there are certain conditions that I can use a firearm to protect myself. If you're backing off, I'm in trouble. Even if you're coming at me in certain things, I'm still in trouble. Police officers are shooting guys in the back. Now, you don't necessarily know the whole story, but that doesn't seem right. And these are professionals. The guy the other day on the news where he was accosting the woman, and the boyfriend came up and pushed him down. He was concealed carry. He was shocked and he was mad, and the guy was backing away from him, and he shot him. He's getting off because of the law about what they call that. I lost my train of thought on that. But the point is
protection.
Professionals, when they make these basic mistakes, just think about the ordinary citizen. So my position is I'm for more controls. I don't know exactly what they are, but it's not the gun. The gun is just a tool.
Some minimal degree of control.
There's got to be some things to do. Yeah, I don't want a guy walking in. I've enjoyed it. Walk in, I like this, and I can walk out today like any other commodity. But I wouldn't mind waiting if they need to really thoroughly check me out. I don't think though that the focus needs to be as much on that as how do we evaluate folks.
We got to stop, because you and I can go on forever.
Forever on this. I know this will get you jacked up.
So let's you tell the viewers how you feel about the First and Second Amendments and what's going on with them and what needs to be done to make them more effective and useful for us as ordinary citizens.
My basic message on the amendments is I think that we are so fortunate to live in the U.S. with the rights, individual rights that we have, a republic that allows individuals more freedoms than probably just about any country there is. But my message is, with that comes really important responsibilities, and you need to be serious about those responsibilities. One, to keep the right, because they can be eventually taken away if they're abused, and two, it just makes good common sense.
Well, I am so glad and fortunate to be an American and living in this system that we have. I need to keep working at making it more meaningful and useful for the ordinary citizens. And we better stop now before they yell at me again. Public service announcement, once you have time for one or two, or probably not. To watch my shows on the web, Google, Don Bay, and YouTube. There's a whole bunch of shows through the years, and you can see some of the other shows and my other guests and interesting stuff. And I want to tell you about how to end incorporate personhood. Go to www.movetoamend.org. We've got to amend the Constitution to say that money is not speech and corporations are not persons. Oh, the ACLU. Without the American Civil Liberties Union, our civil liberties would be further down the tube than they are. I've been a member of the ACLU for 3,000 years. No, only about 40 years. So I love it. And thanks for watching. Remember KFC. Not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind and be friendly and be charitable to you too. And you too, especially you. You too. Thanks again. And we'll be watching for you, watching us next time. Take care and good night.